Hi, I'm Lindsay from Shreve Memorial Library and welcome to Art Club. So last week I got a little ahead of myself and did the salt program that I had planned to do for this week because pandemic and time has no meaning. So this week we are going to do another Salt Art Club. This one's going to be a little bit different, but it's going to be the same theme, and this would be a fun companion piece to the one we did last week. So this time, instead of a field of wildflowers, we're going to do a lovely spring tree with salt resist. So here's what you need. You need a paintbrush, and I have watercolor paper. It's 5x7. It's taped onto a board. You can use whatever size you want. You don't even really have to. I would use watercolor paper for this one. Okay, so I have 3 watercolors. You don't have to have these exact colors. You just need something in the general family. This is a green. This is permanent sap green. This is cerulean blue. And this is permanent rose. I want to say, yeah, this is just a pink. If you have a pink, that's perfectly great. If you have like a magenta, that's fine. And if you only have red, just use it diluted. It'll be fine. So I have 3 watercolors, and I have 2 colored pencils, 1 brown and 1 pink. I have my little palette. I have some water, and I have salt. This time I thought it would be fun. Since last time we used regular table salt, this time I have kosher salt. And you totally don't need to use kosher salt for this. You can use table salt. We saw last week that table salt's perfectly fine. I just thought it might be fun to see if we get a different result out of this. I'm using the same paper and the same watercolors, so we'll see if the salt makes a difference. So anyway, let's get going. Just like last week, I'm going to use a wet and wet technique. And the first thing, all that means is that I'm going to paint wet paint on a wet surface. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to wet my watercolor paper. It just means I'm going to paint it with water. And I want it good and wet, but I don't want any pooling, because if it pools, the paint is going to pool and you're going to end up with some really badly concentrated paint in some areas, and then you won't be happy. Also, it'll take even longer to dry, than we're going to have to wait for it. So this looks good. Again, I want it pretty wet, but I don't want it pooled. We have to do all of this while it's wet, so we want it pretty wet. So I'm going to do the same thing I did last week with the sky. I'm probably put a little bit more than I did last week, and right now I'm just going to go straight from the pan. Just put on a bunch of paint. Okay, and then I want it darker at the top and lighter at the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start diluting my paint with water, and then just kind of come down like that. And remember that watercolor it dries lighter than it looks like it's going to. So that would be lighter. I'll probably put a little bit more. So I'm going to do the same thing with the green, but from the bottom. A good bit of green down there, just like that. I'm going to pile it on. So put as much blue and green as you want. I'm not worried about that line particularly. I'm going to put some more blue up there. Okay, so I'm okay with this so far. One thing I do want to do is I want to put some variation in the bottom, since we're not just going to do that line of flowers. I get some green, concentrated green, same green, and put little dots around just to look like little bushes or trees in the background. And just plop all this stuff in. Again, it has to be done while this painting is still wet. So you can just plop stuff in however you want it, just to have some kind of variation in the colors and on that line. We're just adding some interest. Oops, that's okay. Okay, that looks great. Now I'm going to, while it's still dry, go in with the salt like I did last time. Okay, again, you might want to do this on like some other surface than your main work surface, just because it's messy. But you know, I guess I'm a daredevil that way. So I've got some salt, And this time, instead of sprinkling it along the line, I'm going to concentrate it in the middle in the sky. Okay? Can go up farther. You see how this is, how kosher salt's bigger? It's the main difference I know of. And you see how it's drawing the color to it? Yeah, that's what we want. So I'm going to put a good bit in the middle here. I'm letting a little bit go out. Trying to keep it pretty reasonably, controlled. Some of it's going in the bottom, and that is okay. So I'm going to put a little more. So I want this to show up as lighter than the rest. Just like, think of this as like tree leaves. Okay? So put as much or as little as you want, and then let it sit. And you're going to want to let it sit for, last time it was about 15 minutes was good. So let it sit for about 15 minutes and then come back to it and see if it's dry. And if it's dry, you're good. I'll be back in about 15 minutes. Okay, it has been about 25 minutes and my painting is dry except for these super duper stubborn bits that you can see down here. They're still shiny and I'm fed up with that. So I'm going to be impatient and hopefully not ruin my painting. So I'm going to do about those. They should be mostly dry. What's going to be absorbed should be absorbed by now. And so I'm just going to go dab and pick up that salt, and at least this is what I'm doing right now really is preventing further damage to my paper once I start brushing this off. So I just dabbed it. You see kind of what the salt's doing already. Now I'm gonna dry around it so I'm not dealing with a bunch of salt mess, and all of this is okay. And I'm going to shake this into the trash can. Don't eat the salt that you use for your painting. Okay, I think that's it. And this is really interesting because I appear to have gotten a different result. And I see I got some green up in my tree, but that is okay. I seem to have gotten a different result with kosher salt than I did with the other one. The regular salt was just like whole areas of it, but this is just like, I guess it's just because there weren't so many little bits of it on there. It's very interesting. So if you look back at the other one, you can see the difference of what they do. It's also affected by the kind of paper you're using and the kind of paint you're using, because some papers absorb more paint more quickly, and some paints stain the paper more. So it's like, if I wouldn't suggest using, really, if you have a phthalo blue paint, I wouldn't suggest using that because that's super stainy and you might not even be able to see it because it stains so fast. Anything else would be good. And if you have like one of those little things of eight, that's fine too. But yeah, so here's what we've got this time. I'm not really concerned about the green I accidentally got up in there. Okay, I have a smaller brush than the one I used earlier, though you can totally use the same brush. That is definitely no big deal. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to wet this a little bit, okay? Just spots. Like, I'm just kind of dabbing little areas. I'm not even doing the whole thing, and I'm not concerned about getting the whole thing. I'm going to go down all through here, just like this, and wet it. So we're going to be doing more wet and wet. Look around. You don't want any big pools. You can just paint all this area. Just if you do, kind of dab it like I am, because you're going to be picking up some of that paint from earlier. And I wouldn't want to do that, but you can if you want. So here's what I'm going to do, okay? I'm going to get some of this pink, and I'm going to dilute it. Like, it's going to be pretty darn diluted. I just want a hint of pink in this tree, okay? I don't want a ton. So, let's see. That's pretty light. I'm going to make it a little lighter. I want it to be subtle. There we go. So I'm just going to go drop in little bits of pink, and they will catch and spread in the areas that I just wet. So this isn't taking much, and again, you can use diluted white, but you see how they're just kind of filling up and making those white areas look like they just have a little hint of pink. I think this looks really nice. So put as much or as little pink as you want. Just keep it, you probably want it diluted. So that just means add a bunch of water until you get a color that you like. If you want to, you can even put in like multiple colors. Okay, and now I'm gonna let this dry. You can dry it with a blow dryer or well, like one of those heat tool things. Just wait until it's not gonna run, because if you start doing it and it's gonna run, you're gonna have a bad time and be unhappy. And remember before you do that your color is going to dry lighter than what it looks like when it's wet. Okay, my painting is dry, and you can kind of see the treeness to this. So that's what I've got these for. I don't know that I'll use this one. We'll see. Since I use so much pink watercolor. So I've got this. This is brown. And I'm going to turn this into a tree. Now don't stress out about this. All I'm going to do is I'm going to have a trunk coming down from here. Okay. And here. And a little wavy line down here. I'm just going to kind of loosely color it in. You can totally do all this with watercolor if you'd rather. I just figured it might be fun to do it. Okay, it might be easier for everybody involved to just do it with colored pencil. Okay, you can make it as darker or not as you want. So there's the base of my tree, and now we have to add in here some branches so it looks like everything just isn't floating in oblivion. So I'm going to add some here, and you just kind of go the way your tree turned out will be different than the way mine turned out, I mean, for obvious reasons. So I'm just kind of putting branches in the holes, and they get smaller as they go up. And that's pretty much the only rule. So here's this kind of just continuing, that's kind of splitting off. And you see what I'm doing? I'm just finding the little holes and putting little branches in them. They don't even really have to be connected to something. We can just kind of infer that they're connected to something. We just don't want our tree, you can put little V's in there. We don't want our tree to look like it's just, you know, has a bunch of floating stuff. You can do Y's, little hints of bits, just to show that the tree is, it is a tree. So you can put as many as you want. Don't stress out about this. It does not need to be perfect. It just, to make it look like, you know, it's actually there, not just. Okay, I'm kind of letting, I'm coloring this stuff lightly and letting the watercolor paper kind of make my texture for me. But if you're using a lighter colored paper, just do it as much or as little as you want. Just make sure your paper is dry before you do this so you're not damaging anything, because we already introduced some damage with the that looks good, that with the salt. So okay, you can stop there. I'm gonna stop there. I like my little tree. You can add more, you can do however you want. I like the way it turned out. You can, if you wish you had more pink, you can go in with pink. You can add some yellow, you can add some black, you can add whatever color you want. I kind of like the way this turned out. So I'm going to sign my painting. I'm going to do it with that. And there we go. Here it is. A very springy, I'll call it, it's not a cherry blossom tree because it's not the right structure, but it is, I'm just going to call it a spring tree that happens to be pink because I wanted it to be pink. So if you want a different color tree, you can totally do that, or you can leave it white. One of my favorite trees are Bradford pear trees. They're so pretty, but evidently they are terrible for the environment. I need to do some research on that myself, but yeah, I am super happy with how this turned out. It always looks better after we pull off the tape and get those nice clean edges. Yay! I like this. I'm not sure which one I like better, the one from this week or last week. But now it's very interesting to see the difference in the salt resist depending on what kind of salt you're using. And you'll get different results with different paper, different paint, all kinds of things. So I'm not sure which I like better. I think for this purpose, I'm really happy with these big areas from the kosher salt instead of the other one. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you had a good time, and I hope you painted along. And if you did, please take a picture and send it into the library social media. We would love to see what you do. And yeah, join me next week for more art club. Bye.